My name is Tamara Paquette, and it is the eve of the 18th anniversary of September 11th, and I am currently at a cancer clinic in Tijuana, Mexico, fighting follicular lymphoma as well as breast cancer. Both are stage 4. One had gone undiagnosed for a very long time, the follicular lymphoma, and the breast cancer, we discovered the lump December 2016. The reason why I'm telling this story is because I don't know if I'm going to have time, and there is so much people need to know that happened on 9/11 and the weeks afterwards that they didn't get in the newspaper, they weren't on the radio, you didn't hear them on the television. You're never going to hear these stories because they never got to the headlines. But these are my stories, and I met a lot of heroes, and I met a lot of really incredible people that were dedicated and devoted and really showed what human beings can do in a crisis to come together. So those are the kinds of stories that I want to tell. Number one, where was I? I was in New York City. I was living on the Upper West Side on West 65th Street between Central Park West and Broadway, right at Lincoln Center. My husband and I had a little apartment there that we were sharing. We had a production company. We were doing our own shows. We were traveling all over, and really, we were living the actor's dream life. The two of us together. It was arts brought us together. It bonded us, and it kept us strong for the longest time. And the eve, September 11th happened, but the night before, we had done a show. And it was great. I mean, the audience was fantastic. We got lots of laughs. We really felt like, yeah, we're in the right place. We're doing the right things. And we're really loving what we're doing. The next morning, the phone rings. And of course, we're sleeping late because the night after a show, there's that adrenaline rush. So you don't go to bed till late, so you get up late. And the phone rings, and it's my ex-husband, and he said, "Turn on the television." So I clicked on the TV, and the second plane hit. So I said, "Thank you, love you, bye," click, and I ran and I got dressed. Because in my mind, I realized it's one thing if one plane hits, but then if a second plane hits, we're in for something more serious. And I just knew it. I felt it in my bones. We were under attack. So I ran and I got dressed, and we went downstairs. We went to the ATM machine, and we pulled out a whole bunch of money, because in my brain I'm thinking, well, if we're under attack, the first things that are going to go down is the banks, and they're going to shut off, and we're going to need cash. So, and then I went into hurricane mode, because growing up in Florida, you're always prepared for a hurricane, but you never know if you need just a few extra essentials in case the power goes down. So we went to the grocery store, got more essentials, brought them back to the house, and put them in the apartment. Whatever we needed, I left them on the counter, and I kissed my husband, and I put my go bag on around my waist with all of my emergency stuff, and I ran to Roosevelt Hospital, because I knew we were going to be receiving triage. In my mind, I knew that we were going to be receiving people with every kind of condition. So I get there, and I wasn't the only one with this mindset. So doctors and nurses from all over, first responders, clergy, they ran to Roosevelt Hospital, and they were ready, and they were prepared, and we were together. We were like a team, and we waited, and we waited. And we were not receiving floods and floods of people coming with injuries and cuts and what would happen and what you would think would be the Twin Towers coming down. We were receiving floods of people holding up, they printed on their printers pictures of their loved ones. Have you seen my brother? Have you seen my sister? Have you seen my son? Have you seen my daughter? And what we ended up doing in the lobby of Roosevelt Hospital is it was like a grieving center. Now, I've never been trained for that. It was kind of a grassroots kind of thing. And the clergy that had come, they helped, guide us. So when people came in and they were just grieving because they couldn't find their child or their parent, we would take them aside, we'd try to give them a sandwich or just be there with them. Try to console them and be of some kind of comfort. We were not receiving ambulances. We weren't receiving people even with toe tags. So what we noticed really quickly was wherever there was a need, people just jumped in and filled it. For example, the Sikhs, the ones that were driving taxis, or folks from Pakistan, or all those countries where, people in movies make fun of the accents and they go on and on about the crazy New York City drivers. But I tell you what, two things that I learned in New York City. Number one, taxi drivers, always trust them because they know everything. They always give the best advice, even if it sounds crazy, but they got their feet on the ground and they're like bloodhounds. They know where everything is. They know what's going on. They are the lifeblood of New York City. And number two, they've got the biggest hearts when it comes to crisis, because the Sikhs and the Middle Eastern men, they would, when we had the families leaving the hospital, and they were going from hospital to hospital all across Manhattan. Then families were going out into the boroughs looking for their lost loved ones. These taxi drivers were picking them up at their own expense and taking them for free, driving them wherever they wanted to go at no charge whatsoever. Now, I tell you, I've never heard this story anywhere, but I want you to know I was there at the hospital and I saw taxi drivers coming in, and I worked the front. I volunteered at the front desk as people were coming in and they had a necessity. It was, okay, you can go here. Okay, you could go here. This is, for some reason, I just kind of walked in and I took over the front desk, and that was my thing. And I helped connect the people that were in need with those that needed, with those that were ready to provide. And I'm telling you, these taxi drivers, they jumped in and they were heroes to these families that were terrified that they would never see their loved one again. So that's one story I want to tell you, besides the fact that Roosevelt Hospital was so kind and so lovely. The actual staff that was working there all the time was so happy to have volunteers just come in and say, I'll be here. And the second thing that we did, besides run interference, is we were guards. Because if you can imagine, if your mother had just had gallbladder surgery, and all of a sudden, they thought there would be thousands of people flooding into the hospitals. If your mom was in the hospital, the family would be coming in going, is my mom going to be forgotten? Or is she going to still be taken care of? And of course, we were there to make sure that crazies didn't come in and try to get in the hospital that shouldn't be there. So it was very complicated to figure out, number one, do you really have someone here in this hospital? Do you really belong here? And if so, the volunteers would actually walk the person up to the hospital room and make sure that that person was with their loved one and that loved one recognized them. So we were kind of like police. But we had a bond. You know, the locals just came together and we had an amazing experience. And I don't want to say that I wish everybody could feel that feeling, but it's pretty amazing that in a crisis, the love and the willingness to help comes out. I mean, human beings really have a capacity for good. And this was one of those moments where you need to know that the cream really rose on that day. So a couple other awesome stories. So I was at Roosevelt Hospital for quite a few days afterwards. And then because people realized that there were no bodies, there wasn't any triage to take place. We weren't getting anybody. So the volunteers weren't really needed anymore, except for just to, you know, let people know that, no, I'm sorry, we don't have any John Does, or we didn't receive anybody. I went walking through the Upper West Side, and I do what I always do. You know, I seek solace in the Creator, and I walked into a church. And there was this minister up on the dais, and he was railing about how we brought this on ourselves. This was our fault. And it struck me as something incredibly cruel. It's a horrible business model when religions use crisis to drum up business. If you want to create a market, you know, do it with love. Don't do it with fear. So as this man of God ministered to these scared, frightened people, I just got up and left, and I walked out. And as soon as one person has the courage to get up and say, this is wrong, I'm not going to stand for it, I got up, and then more people got up and walked out because they realized, oh, yeah, this is baloney. You can't hang people of faith with the problems that, you know, God is of love. God is a loving God. This Old Testament version is pulled out when it's useful to particular groups that are, you know, they're wanting to drum up business. They need souls and they need money. So I got up and I walked out, and a lot of people followed me, and I felt, okay, I know I don't need to be here. So I walked down the street, and there was this Catholic church that was just right down the way, and a 18-wheeler pulls up right on the side of the road, and the driver jumps out and says, I've got all this stuff that was sent here from the Carolinas. I need to unload it. So I don't know why he looked at me, of all people. I'm just walking down the street, and he looks at me like somehow I'm in charge. And I'm just like, okay, well, let's see what you got. So he opened it up and he looks at it. I'm like, in the inside of this truck, there were pickaxes, boots, rebreathers, food, water, blankets, everything that you could think of for a disaster. And I'm thinking, oh, the people that put this together, they were divinely guided, because who sends boots and pickaxes in a truck from the Carolinas to New York City? Whoever arranged this drive was brilliant. And on the inside of the truck, along the wall, you could see people wrote on the inside of the truck all these loving notes and messages to give us encouragement that they were behind us. Now, I know that a lot of times people give the Southerners a really hard time. I even myself have made fun of the accents, and it's really arrogant and it's cruel and it's wrong of me to do that. But that day, I realized that, you know, for all the crazy things that goes on in the South, when push came to shove, they rallied their communities and they sent an 18-wheeler full of supplies to New York City. And the inside of the truck was like a big greeting card of love and they're with us. And it was incredible. So I just whistled and I clapped my hands, and because people in New York City at the time, they were kind of wandering around like zombies. They couldn't stand in front or sit in front of the television anymore and watch the images of the Twin Towers coming down and the smoke and people running for their lives. They couldn't deal with the trauma. So they were wandering around the streets trying to just not fall apart. So I gave them something to do. I just whistled and called, and I'm like, come on, let's unload this. And we were gonna bring it down into the hall at the church. But as we're unloading, the priest comes out and says, I'm sorry, but we don't have any more room. We've got so much stuff that people have been donating that we have no more room. I don't know what to do with it. Please stop. So I went, whoa. And then I had heard of these 3 little nuns that had set up on the side of the West Side Highway, right by Clarkston Street, and they were handing sandwiches out to the emergency workers going down into the hole. And I thought, well, let's just set up camp there. And I told the driver, I said, come on, let's go. We pulled the door down, we locked it, and I jumped in the front seat, and we went down the West Side Highway, and we stopped off at Clarkston Street, and I jumped out, and the group had grown a little bit. You know, it wasn't just the 3 nuns handing out sandwiches anymore. It was New Yorkers holding signs. Now, you have to remember, the bridges and the tunnels were closed off. We were completely isolated. You couldn't get on and you couldn't get off the island at all. So everybody that was standing on the side of the road, these New Yorkers, they made signs to stand there so that when the emergency workers going in and out of the hole down the West Side Highway, they were cheering them on, telling them how much they loved them. It was like a pep rally right at Clarkston Street, because that was the last stop. Unless you were an emergency worker, you couldn't get past Clarkston Street. And as you stand there, and everything is burning. And that's one thing that you'll never forget. Smelling 3,000 people burned to death is something that you're never going to forget. And that's not a bad thing, because it makes you go forward in life to make sure that it never happens again. You know, no hay mal por bien no venga, right? And there's always something good that comes out of bad. And you have to look for that. So as we pull this 18-wheeler up to the side of the road, we couldn't go any further. So I jump out of the truck, and there's some people on the side of the road, and I hollered to everybody and whistled to them like, come on everybody, let's go. We've got supplies. And they were like, yeah. So we opened up the door and we started unloading the truck. And we unloaded and we set up Gatorade, water, blankets, and then we put the tools right along the side of the road. And they'd even sent us vests. I mean, who sends vests? I mean, these people from Carolina, they were brilliant. And the boots, and then there was food. There was like medical kits. We had a section for medical kits. So any of the emergency workers going in or any of the emergency workers going out, we set up a chain gang on both sides, so that if anybody needed anything, whether they were coming in or going out, we now were able to supply them with what they needed. And we called it the Clarkston effort. we didn't know what else, you know, at that time. And it was also, and this is the thing that really, this upset me, the news outlets came. The news outlets came. And this was a great shot, you know, where they could set up their cameras and get the picture in the background with the smoke coming up and the activity going around. And it made me so mad. It made me so mad that they were sensationalizing the murder of people we know, our brothers and sisters, to make good TV. And at that time, I was really, really angry at them. And they're always trying to come up and put a microphone in your face and, you know, get the story. And our group, they were like, get away or we're gonna hit you. We did not, our team, they had no desire to be on camera or give the scoop, or that was the big thing, is they kept, how do you feel? Well, I feel like I'm gonna fucking punch you in the mouth if you don't get out of my face. It was like that. We are doing some serious work here, and we're not going to be your scoop. And the best part is this team, we worked 24/7. 24/7. There was never not somebody there to help these workers coming in and out, in and out. And the love we shared was intense. It was incredible. And maybe one of the mistakes I made, and I'm going to own up to it, they did we did get donations of masks. We did. We got donations of masks. But it was hotter than you can imagine. It wasn't a cool September. It was, maybe it was the work. Maybe it was the stress, who knows? But I didn't put on a little dust mask. Not that those particulates would have done any good, but we wanted to save the masks for the workers going down because, oh my God, people actually did send those really hardcore, not rebreathers, but the ones with the two filters on either side that filter out everything. It was amazing. But I just, walking and talking and dealing, it never occurred to me that I really needed to pay attention to that, and I just wanted to defer to give it to somebody else. So I'm not saying that I got cancer from breathing the air down at they call it ground zero, and it ended up getting called ground zero after a while. But chances are that's where it came from, and that's okay. That's okay. I wouldn't do it any differently. But I want you to know that the people that came together that day, it wasn't all tragic. After those weeks following, it wasn't all gloom and doom. The greatest of humanity came forth. And not just in the United States. It came from around the world. My husband at the time, Jeff Peters, he stayed at home. And he coordinated efforts because all we had was internet. We had no phone. Everything was down. But somehow he magically was able to get out messages into the world through the internet. And he was able to let people know that we were okay, that we were all right, and that we were doing some good. So he was home base. And it was probably harder for him than it was for me because we didn't have any phone service, so he didn't know where his wife was out, wherever the heck she ended up. But he knew that I was following my calling. I was doing what I was doing. And he was doing what he does best, which is coordinating. He's a director, he's a producer. You know, you give him a structure and he knows how to make that happen, and he does it really well. And the hardest part was when FEMA tried to shut us down on the side of the road because we didn't have a permit. I know. We didn't have a permit for the land because we basically built a tent city and we didn't have a permit, and they were wanting to shut us down even though we were doing good, but they were clearing us out because they're like, don't worry, we got this handled. we'll take it from here. So Jeff was doing everything he can, even though the world had fallen apart, to try to get to the right people in order to let us stay here and help out. But they eventually did shut us down, and we found homes for all of those donated goods. They didn't just go off into some kind of warehouse somewhere. And then the next thing, one of the volunteers, she was a trained psychiatrist. And so because the responders, the firefighters had lost so many of their brothers. And it was a crisis for the fraternity, that because of the way the system was set up, and nobody knew at the time what PTSD was. We may have heard of it, but it was just another, letter strung together, which means nothing. And we did not understand it. And also because the firefighters at the time were afraid to admit that they maybe would need some counseling, because they didn't want it to affect their job. They didn't want to lose their job because somebody might think they're crazy or that they can't handle it. This is how nutty it was 20 years ago. That you were afraid to ask for counseling because you're afraid to lose your job. But one of the best things that came out of September 11th is people realized that stress is real. Stress, when it's internalized, it destroys the person and it destroys relationships. Happened here many times. So she's my girlfriend, and I mean, we just bonded. And what's terrible about it is that we no longer stay in contact with one another because we lost touch. As a psychiatrist, she created a team of men and women, and I was part of the core group, and we would go from firehouse to firehouse to firehouse unofficially, and we were hugs. That's what we called ourselves. We would go into the firehouse and we would just hug the firefighters. We would hold them in our arms, and we didn't do anything but just hold them. And some of these guys, they're like 6'4", 240 pounds. If you want a firefighter to pull you out of a burning building, these guys, they're the ones that they just fell apart like babies in our arms, because it was the first place they could be where they felt safe enough and secure enough, where nobody was watching, nobody was judging, nobody was taking notes. It wasn't their wife, where they would feel, I don't want to cry in front of my wife, I don't want to cry in front of my children, I just don't know how to deal with this. But we would go from firehouse to firehouse, and we would just hold these guys in our arms and let them talk. We didn't interrupt. We didn't offer advice. We didn't tell them, well, you should do this, and you should be feeling this way, and buck up, little soldier. None of that. We just went there day after day, gave them hugs, and we just were there to be someone to talk to, that maybe in a good way that they'll never see again, so that they know that they were loved and that they were appreciated. Because first responders, EMTs, police officers, firefighters, nurses, and all of the ancillary groups surrounding that, their jobs are stressful enough, never mind something cataclysmic like this, and the politics that go along with it. So you're never going to hear about the stories of the hug group that went from firehouse to firehouse. But it happened. I was there. I was part of it, and I'm proud. And I've never written this down, and I've never told my story. I don't know why, but I guess probably because it's the eve of the 18th anniversary, and I've got cancer, and I don't know if I'm going to survive or not. I'm telling myself that I'm going to keep going for as long as God needs me because I was brought here for a reason. And Lord, here are my hands. How can I serve? That is my cause. I have no other reason to be here other than that. And whatever comes of it, I'm okay with that. So I am very grateful to all of my friends and family that put up with me post 9/11. PTSD is a heck of a thing to live through. But when the globe experienced it, the planet felt it. It wasn't just in New York City. Everybody everywhere felt it. Something changed, something shifted in the world. And in my perspective, the good that came out of it. Because once people experience trauma, they don't want it to happen again to anybody else. And the women are waking up in the world. The women are saying to themselves, too many of our children are dying, and we're not going to let this happen anymore. And I honor that, and I respect that, and I encourage that, and I am part of that movement. Because we are, the Dalai Lama said that it's the Western woman who's going to save the world, and it's the truth. We are going to do our part. We're going to do our share. We're going to do everything we can to clean up the planet, spread love and contentment. We're going to make sure that when the rising tide comes in, all boats go up, not just a few. We're going to make the world safer, less scary. We're going to nurture our way to it. We're not going to be like that minister who scared everybody and made matters worse. Well, thank you for letting me share my story with you. Whatever your journey is right now, make it a good one. Namaste.